So I just want to go over a couple things in terms of exporting and importing that didn't quite work in our previous um, overview. So I'm going to go back to Animate first, and when we tried publishing our folder of Swift files, the animation was not working, and that was because there's a new setting that we can change in our document settings. So if we go to Modify and Document, there's this setting down here called Use Advanced Layers, and I'm not really sure why, but this prevents the animation from working when we import it into After Effects. So we're just going to turn that off, and we're going to confirm that we want to turn that off. And so now, if I go to my publish settings again and turn on my Swift archive, everything else is going to stay the same. So I'm just going to set this to publish in the same place. I'm going to replace that. Everything else will stay the same, but I'm going to go to export and, publish. And then when I go to my documents folder, go to Annie 260, I have my walk cycle all the way down here. I'm just going to extract this, and I'm going to replace the files. And these should update in After Effects. So let's do a really quick example of that. So I'm going to go to After Effects. I have a new composition here, and so I'll go over the process that I would normally do for this. So I'll just import first. I can right click over in my project settings, go to Import and File, and there's my walk cycle Swifts. So I'll grab those and click Import here. And so now I have these files, and if I want to put them into a composition, I can just grab them and drag them over to new composition from footage. And that's going to make a single composition, and we're going to hit OK. And we're just going to rename this. This is our walk cycle. And so now we should see that animation working. And there we go, so that works. Another thing that we can do that I didn't do before, so let's turn off the ground here, and I'm going to save this as walk cycle 2. Okay, so I'm going to turn off the ground here, and for my shading, when that comes in, that doesn't really look the way we want it to look. So what we can do is go select this layer and go to Layer, go to Blending Mode, and then we're just going to choose the same blending mode overlay that we had in our Animate. So I'm going to save that, and since I'm reviewing everything, let's just make our loop again. So I'm going to go to Composition Settings and make this composition longer, so I'm going to go with 5 seconds. So then I'll make my work area larger. And so one thing that actually would be good to go over is if I edit, now that I have my shading working a little bit better, if I edit these guys, individually, they're not going to line up. So what I can do is just put this into a new composition. So I'll make a new composition here. I'll call this main. And I'll just put my walk cycle into this composition. And so now that will play these guys together, but I can go back to my walk cycle, and what I'm going to have to do is turn on time remapping, and I'll make this the full duration. Well, I guess I'm going to have to do this for both of my layers anyway. Okay. And so now I've got the layers going longer, but it's not looping, so we have to put in our loop expression. So we just have to grab the pick whip and go to time remap, and then open up the expression thing here, and then click on the arrow and go to property, and we're just going to choose loop out, And let's do that up here as well. And okay, we'll go to property, go to loop out. Okay, so now we've got the full looping animation. So that looks good, and now we have this main composition where we have our full looping animation where we can animate both of those frames together. So that's looking good. Let's go ahead and put our background in there and just recreate this whole thing since I've already redone most of it. So I'm just going to go to Photoshop, and let's actually fix a couple things so we can demonstrate something that we didn't fully get to last time. So for my foreground and my background, let's merge these layers together so that we can import them as separate footage. And so normally what I would do if I'm doing something like this, before we just imported the whole Photoshop file, and if you want to just use that, that's fine. But normally what I would do for something like this is I would actually just like duplicate this whole thing and make a group and call this like originals. And then I would duplicate that group and call this export or something like that. And then in my export, I would just go in and clean this up. So I'm going to delete this ground line. I'm going to merge these layers down. So I'm going to select this layer and go to merge layers and make sure to call this foreground. And I'll do the same thing with my background. I'll merge these guys and call this background. So I forgot to label the foreground earlier, but now I can separate these things, which looks good. And so now I can save my Photoshop file. And with the Photoshop file, it will link into After Effects, so we don't have to do the whole thing where we export the different files. But what I can do is go into After Effects and go back to import a file, and then find this background. But now when I go to my import settings, I'm going to choose a layer. So I'll choose this foreground layer. Click OK. So now we see that foreground. And then I'll import again, and I'll import my background layer. And so now when I make updates to Photoshop, these will both update. And the thing that's nice here is I can put my foreground in, I can put my background in, and now when I do this animation, I can do a little parallax effect. So I can animate these guys again. So I'll choose the foreground and hit P, and I'll go to 1280 to move it over there and keyframe it. And then I'll do the same thing with my background. I'll hit P on the keyboard and do 1280 and keyframe this. Although I might want to get to the planet, but we'll see that in a second. So now if I scroll over here, I can move my foreground forward. So I'm going to hit 0 there. And so now we'll see the foreground moving along as we walk along. But now I can animate the background at a different rate, and that'll give me a little parallax effect. It'll make like the background look like it's farther away. So with my background, when I go to the end, instead of going all the way to 0, maybe I'll go to like 960, or I'll go up till where I see the planet come in maybe, or that might be a little too far. Maybe something like that. So it's not quite the full range. Okay, so now they're moving at different rates, which gives kind of a nice effect. It makes it look like there's a little depth to the scene. Again, this is just a little effect. You don't have to do this, but that's just something that could be kind of cool. Okay, so last little bit, and then we'll go on to adding our camera. Let's just fix this guy again. So let's open the position of the walk cycle. Now I do have my like shading stuff going on, and the nice thing is since I'm using those Swifts, you can see there's a few mistakes in here that show up in After Effects that weren't showing up as obviously when I was working in Animate. But since I'm using the Swifts, I can easily go and clean those up and then export them again, and it will look good. So let's animate the position real quick. So when he goes here, we're gonna add a keyframe. This is a little bit of review, but since we started over, just gonna do this again. So I'm just moving the Y value of this composition, and since I have the layers in the composition, it's moving both of them at the same time, so they'll stay lined up. Okay, so there we've got our walking. And I might want to add some more keyframes and do some work with like the graph editor. Maybe I can fix the interpolation a little bit. But for the demo, let's just leave that there. So that's looking pretty good. So let's see, we can see there's parts in like right there, there's this green dot that we don't want. So that's a good thing to use as an example for how we would clean this up. So I'm just gonna leave this open. I'm gonna go back to my Adobe Animate, and I'm gonna look to see if I can find that green dot. There it is. And let's see if we can figure out which layer it's on. It's on the final color layer. And there's actually another green dot there that's not visible, but let's just get rid of that one. So I'm gonna get the eraser and just get rid of that. Uh-oh. It doesn't want to be erased. Okay, let's select it and delete it. Okay, there we go. There's also like a little dot here. We can delete that. So we can clean things up a little bit. Maybe I'll get rid of that dot, even though it's not visible. We can clean things up a little bit, and then all I have to do is click Publish again and go back to my folder and just extract this archive again. So I'll click Extract All and replace the files. And hopefully, when we come back, the green dot goes away. So that's the reason to do it this way, is that you can very quickly update those Swift files and you don't have to reanimate stuff because the files go into the same place in After Effects, and so all the little property animations that we did stay intact. Okay, so I hope this PowerPoint recording worked. I'm gonna